Welcome to the Payback Vault, your go-to hub for revenge stories, epic payback, and jaw-dropping karma. If you love thrilling tales of justice and dramatic moments, you're in the right place. Buckle up, because today's story is packed with twists you won't see coming. Imagine building up your life piece by piece, finding love, and reconnecting with old friends, only to have everything crash down at the hands of someone you thought you could trust. That's exactly what happened to our protagonist, Rafi. Rafi had served in the Navy and, after years of service, returned to his hometown to recover from a long injury and to start fresh. Things began to look up when he reconnected with a high school sweetheart, Sophie, who had a young daughter, and it wasn't long before he felt they were creating something beautiful together. Sophie's little girl even started calling him Dad, and to Rafi, it felt like fate had given him a second chance. But there was one dark shadow in Sophie's life, a friend she called her brother, Julian. He was a scruffy, jobless guy who had earned his nickname by always being there to help Sophie when she needed it, especially when her daughter was young. But Julian's help always came at a cost. He had ingrained himself into their lives in every way, becoming both an emotional crutch and a freeloading uncle to her little girl. And Rafi, trying to win favor with Sophie, held his tongue for a while. It started with the small things. Julian would laze around her apartment, expect Sophie to cook for him, do his laundry, even tie his shoelaces. Rafi watched, frustrated, but said nothing, thinking he could let it go. After all, he loved Sophie. But when Julian started issuing snarky commands, like demanding that Rafi do the dishes, that's when things shifted. The disrespect, the freeloading, and his cocky threats of calling friends to take care of Rafi if he didn't toe the line, it was all building toward an inevitable confrontation. Then, one morning, everything changed. Rafi was headed out after spending the night, and Julian's voice taunted him, ordering him to clean up the dishes he hadn't even used. Rafi responded with the words he'd held back for months: "Clean them yourself, and don't ever tell me what to do again." As Rafi turned to leave, he heard Julian's footsteps pounding behind him. In one swift, brutal move, Julian shoved Rafi down the stairs. Pain exploded in his body as he hit the concrete floor, his leg flaring up in agony. But before Rafi could get up, Julian was on top of him, fists flying. Fury overtook the pain. Using every bit of training he had left, Rafi fought back, hitting Julian with everything he had. Neighbors heard the fight, and Sophie rushed to break it up. Horrified by what she saw, despite knowing the real story, she was torn. Julian accused Rafi of attacking him, twisting the narrative as if he'd been the victim all along. And in the end, Rafi was the one forced to leave. The love he'd found and the family he was building were ripped away by Julian's manipulations. Rafi walked away heartbroken, thinking it was over, but Julian wasn't done. In the months that followed, Rafi experienced one nightmare after another. His car was vandalized, windows smashed, slurs painted on its sides. Later, someone tried to set his front door on fire. Rafi knew it was Julian, but proving it was impossible. The cops had no solid evidence, and Rafi was advised to let it go. But he couldn't, not after everything Julian had done. So, he started planning. Rafi tracked down one of Julian's few employers, a car shop notorious for shady business. Rafi made a call, claiming he'd heard Julian was under police investigation. The shop owner didn't want that kind of heat and fired Julian on the spot. Then, one night, Rafi returned home from work, tired but with his mind set on moving forward. He was nearly to his apartment door when he saw them, 4 men, hooded and masked, charging down the stairwell toward him. They shoved their way into his apartment as Rafi scrambled inside, slamming the door in vain. This was no random attack. In those split seconds, Rafi's instincts kicked in. He reached into his closet, where he kept a loaded pistol, and turned to face the attackers. Years of training and survival kicked in. He raised the gun, knowing he had no choice. One by one, he neutralized the men in front of him. Julian was among them. He'd been the mastermind of this entire scheme. But his plans had backfired disastrously. After the police arrived, they found Rafi shaken but justified. He was never charged, with evidence proving the men had broken into his home with intent to harm. But the story didn't end there. Julian, though severely injured, survived. He lost the use of his legs, unable to ever walk again, and was later convicted on multiple counts for orchestrating the attack. And though Sophie never reached out to Rafi again, Rafi learned through friends that she eventually moved on and rebuilt her life. Years passed, and Rafi moved forward too. He found new love, a new purpose, and a fulfilling life. He thought he'd closed the chapter on Julian until he saw a Google alert with Julian's name and obituary. It seemed Julian had met his end in prison, picked the wrong fight, and paid the ultimate price. So Rafi's story wasn't the fairy tale ending he'd once hoped for, but in a way, he got his justice. Life had served him a brutal hand, but in the end, karma delivered the final blow. And maybe, just maybe, Rafi found a little peace in knowing that some debts eventually get paid.